So this is something that's kind of new for us. These are going to be going on a second channel in the future, but for now, this one's going here. And today we're going to be doing a review of DONTNOD's Vampyr. If you don't know who DONTNOD is, they made 2015's Life is Strange, which was my favorite game of that year. And as of right now, I have played through Vampyr twice with some change on some other little playthroughs here and there. And I did that because I wanted to experience as much as I realistically could, and for reasons I'll explain later. Also, full disclosure, I did receive a copy of this here game for coverage purposes. And with that out of the way, let's get started. Vampyr is a gothic supernatural RPG developed by DONTNOD and published by Focus Interactive. Taking place in London 1918 after the Great War and during the Spanish flu outbreak, players assume the role of Jonathan Reed, a medical doctor recently turned undead bloodsucker. Jonathan now finds himself involved in an ever-winding vampire conspiracy while also interacting with the townsfolk and deciding whether or not to be a full-blown homicidal vampire, kindly pacifist, or maybe something in between. Now, I'm gonna break this game down into the pros and cons. Still kind of new to this, so hopefully this will help me better articulate what I thought worked and what I thought didn't work until I get more comfortable with these types of videos. Anyway, the pros. The gameplay. Now, I really enjoyed the gameplay in Vampyr. It kind of feels like a faster-paced Witcher 3. Jonathan can be equipped with a multitude of different weapons ranging from two-handed clubs or even wield a hacksaw in one hand and a stake or gun in the other. Each weapon has their own distinct uses. Some are strong against human enemies, others are good at fellow supernatural creatures, and some are to be used in a way to break guards so you can drink your enemy's blood, which powers your vampiric abilities. Weapons can also be upgraded at workbenches scattered throughout London in the various tucked-away hideouts. These upgrades can range from doing more damage to adding higher stun capabilities, or even draining blood when attacking. You're not locked in any one upgrade, but if you do decide that you want to play around with the effects, you're going to have to pony up the proper resources again. While you're upgrading your weapons, you can create serums for health, blood, or stamina recovery in combat, or you can create medicine that will help out the various NPCs scattered throughout London, but we'll get into that later. At your hideouts, you can also sleep and upgrade Jonathan's vampiric abilities. The game is very generous when it comes to the abilities because skill points can be reset at any time. Now, the first reset is free, but subsequent uses do cost experience points. The powers themselves are decently creative and can be paired up for some enjoyable combat. You'll need to be constantly aware of your own health meter, your blood meter for using your vampiric abilities, and your stamina for dodging and attacking with your melee weapons. Overall, while it's not the most complicated combat system ever, I think it's very enjoyable. Despite 2 complete playthroughs, I never got tired of the actual combat itself. There's enough variety to keep most encounters fun. The next pros I want to talk about are the dialogue and story, which I am going to lump together. In between combat, you'll converse with the various citizens populating the districts of London. These characters offer everything from lore exposition to their own little side stories and side quests to pursue when not progressing the main story. Main characters and side characters all offer up tons of dialogue choices that will give you more backstory to the current events, as well as their own personal narratives. Exploring these dialogue choices also opens up even more choices when major decisions in the main story are about to occur. And the story itself is fairly compelling and well acted. Between Jonathan learning about his vampiric affliction, why he was infected, and the recent epidemic of the Spanish flu going on, the story offers up plenty of interesting twists and turns throughout its roughly 20 or so hour-ish campaign. Vampyr is also heavily reliant upon choices and how they affect the world around you. For the most part, Vampyr handles this well. There's no morality bar or systems like that in place. It's just the choices and what you feel is appropriate for the story at the time. These can range from something as mundane like choosing who gets to keep an item to a side quest, or it can be something more long-reaching like how you affect certain community pillars. And outside of a few central main characters, every single person in Vampyr can be killed through either your choices or through the game's Mesmerize feature. Jonathan, as a vampire, has the ability to control people providing he is at a high enough Mesmerize level. Now, You'll never use this feature if you're trying to kill as few people as possible, but more chaotic players get the added benefit of gaining tons of experience by doing this, thus making the game an absolute cakewalk. The experience you receive for every person you embrace depends upon whether or not they are currently sick and require medicine, something that you can craft at a workbench, and how much you've interacted with them. The more you learn about these characters, the higher quality their blood will be, which in turn gives you more experience and makes you level up even faster and the game even easier. Like, compare this footage between a level 25 Jonathan that hasn't killed anyone in the entire game outside of enemies, and a level 50 Jonathan who has killed just about everyone. The difference is night and day. I personally find that to be an interesting design decision. The game becomes easier the more evil you are, and taking the high road makes the game significantly more challenging. The next noteworthy pro that I want to discuss is the atmosphere. Vampyr manages to capture a sense of dread and depression with the art direction and through its characters. And while it might not be the most technically visually appeasing game ever, I like how gloomy it portrays its world and its characters. There's this really almost tragic element to the way the game looks. You've got ugly, scarred people all throughout the hospital, the more feral vampires look like they've had every disease ever, and the streets of London itself look fairly menacing. The music is solid too and helps craft that sense of dread that's really important for a horror-centric game like Vampyr. So overall, I think this game is mostly positive. And those were just a few of my points that I wanted to kind of lay out. Now, with that said, let's move on to some of the more noteworthy negatives. Now, the biggest negative, in my opinion, with Vampyr is the save system. You are not allowed to make individual saves. On the one hand, I understand that this choice was made so players have to think about the choices that they are about to make and live with the consequences. That's fine. However, I believe it hinders the overall enjoyment you can have with this game. If you wish to see the story play out in a different manner, then you have to play the game all the way again up until that point. I don't think it was the right call. I didn't even experiment at all with the mesmerize function on my first playthrough because there was no way I could safely try that mechanic out without affecting the narrative I was trying to make with my Jonathan. You have to play this game twice in order to see how the story can play out differently. That's a tall order to ask of your players because this game can easily clock 20 or so hours in a playthrough. So hopefully this can be changed in a future update. I'd love to have the option because there's still story bits I wish I could retry, but I don't feel like playing the game a third time over right now. Also, another note, since you can't load earlier saves, once you get to the end, that's it. No going back to London to finish up a side quest or something. It's just over. I don't know. I think the save system as it stands lowers the overall quality and replayability. The next con I'd like to mention is the traveling. Now, the art direction is fine, as I said earlier, but God bless, I got so tired of having to walk for what felt like 20 years every time I wanted to do a side quest or something. It's just not that fun of a world to explore. It looks pretty, it's got a nice atmosphere and nice look to it, but it's just not that fun to run around and go around. It's just not that interesting. And there's no fast travel or anything either, so you pretty much are just walking everywhere. Now, this probably isn't going to be that big of a problem if you plan on spreading out your playtime over the course of a week or something. Playing it straight through, no. I was dashing past enemies and running pretty much everywhere I could near the end of both my playthroughs. And one more little kind of negative, Vampyr tries to have somewhat of an economy. It tries to give you incentive to purchase items at stores and all that fun stuff, but if I'm being honest, I never really used the stores that much in either of my playthroughs. You'll have too much in terms of money and supplies through natural playing, so I feel like this aspect was just kind of a waste. So yeah, those were just a few of the negatives I had. There's not that many of them, if I'm being honest, or at least ones that bugged me personally, but those kind of stuck out a little bit. So yeah, but overall, my experience with Vampyr was really pleasant. So yeah, I had a overall good time with Vampyr. I would actually recommend people giving it a shot if they can. If they've got $60 to spare, then I think it's worth that price. I played on the PC. I didn't have too many problems. It never crashed or anything like that. I had maybe one dialogue bug happen, and that's about it. And yeah, it's a really solid game. Apart from that save system thing, which I mentioned, There's not too much I can complain about. There's little nitpicks I could have added, but nothing really derailed me from playing the game. And I went through it twice in about 4 days or so, so they did a good job. And it's DONTNOD's third game overall that they've made. And for their first RPG, I think it's great. I had a lot of fun with it. Now, if you're expecting maybe Vampyr the Masquerade, I'd say look somewhere else. This is more in line with something like BioWare. You know, it's very dialogue heavy, a lot of choice stuff, and, you know, with some combat mixed in. So if you're looking for Vampyr the Masquerade, maybe not get this. But yeah, other than that, I would actually highly recommend this game. So that's going to be it for this video, and I will see you all in the next review. So yeah, take care.